It's the second week of September 2025. I'm Dave. I'm here with Andrew, and you're listening to BV Weekly. This week, we'll be talking about the Rilo Kiley reunion that just hit New York City, Turnstile's Tiny Desk stage dive, the great new song from their soon-to-be tourmate Speed, and more. Talking about Turnstile again, aren't we? You stan.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tour is about to start this Monday, so I think it's a good time to bring Turnstile back to the BB Weekly podcast. We'll get there soon. As you alluded to, I watched the new Eminem documentary Stands this past week, which is out now on Paramount Plus.
Oh yeah, how was that?
Yeah, I think it's worth watching. I think it was a little bit misadvertised, if that's a word. Like, I think it was kind of sold as like a documentary about stan culture, and I wish it was a little more of that. It feels more like a documentary about Eminem's career through the lens of like about 10 to 15 Eminem stans that get interviewed for it. And they also talked to some like known people like Carson Daly, Adam Sandler, Dr. Dre, Jimmy Iovine, and the Rolling Stone writer who did the first big Rolling Stone feature on Eminem when he like came to New York City and played, I think he played SOBs, and that was when like Stretch Armstrong was his DJ. But anyway, it was cool. But I do think I was kind of hoping it would dive more into like the sort of current stan culture with things like Swifties and all the stuff that you see on like Pop Crave Twitter and stuff like that. But it was a good Eminem documentary, and it definitely did, it did kind of show some of the dark side of what stan culture can be. And obviously, the reason Eminem made the documentary is because his song "Stan" is where that word comes from. I will say, if I'm kind of throwing out these slight criticisms, I think there should have been a little credit to Nas in there. I mean, Eminem coined the term "stan" with his song, but I would say Nas really made it, or at least popularized it as the noun that it is today when he used it against Jay-Z in Ether. So I think, although Eminem coins it for the song "Stan," I think Nas should get credit for it becoming the word it is today. But yeah, it was a good watch, and I think it really. It's made me think about Eminem as a cultural figure for the first time in a while. I actually rewatched 8 Mile after watching the documentary, because I was like, they show clips of it, and I was like, I got to rewatch 8 Mile.
Oh yeah.
And like, it's really fascinating to me that Eminem basically put out his first popular song in 1999, and by 2002, there was enough lore and myth there that he could make basically like a fictionalized biopic about his life. Like, that's 3 years. Like,
right.
That's like if we get a Chapel Roan movie about her life next year.
Yeah, times were different, I guess, too.
I guess so. It's hard for me to talk about that because I was younger, so it felt longer. But like, and maybe that is part of why it worked, because, Eminem's fan base was kids, which is like, that like comes up in his music, like where he's like raps about parents' reactions to their kids listening to him and stuff, so it's like maybe it worked because if you were 10 when Slim Shady LP came out and you were 13 when 8 Mile came out, it felt long. I don't know. But yeah, he was a really interesting cultural figure, and it was just a really interesting time that has been on my mind a lot lately in general, with things like, I don't know if you saw that the Twitter discourse of this week for music is, why don't people write songs like Sum 41's In Too Deep anymore? Did you see that?
Oh, no, actually. I saw Sum 41 trying to sell socks. And
yeah.
I did see and so then when I saw Sum 41 come up again, I think I thought it was about the socks. But no, what is this one?
It's like, yeah, so someone just tweeted like a clip of Sum 41's In Too Deep and said, why don't white boys make music like this anymore? Which, like, first of all, Sum 41's guitar player is not white. And, a lot of people have pointed out, like, well, a lot of people make music like this that aren't white boys. But I think just in general, like the yearning for songs like that, I guess, was probably the main, has been like a lot of the topic of discussion. It's like, I don't know, a few weeks ago it was Stomp Clap, and now it's Sum 41. But yeah, I there's definitely, I think that the root of it is that there isn't as much popular music like that right now. And so I think people who don't care to look hard enough are just like, why doesn't this exist anymore? And so like the sort of coinciding between this reminiscing on Eminem as a figure and the TRL era, I think I was like the impact that TRL had on the variety of mainstream music, because people got to request videos. And I guess it's like, when you think about like, how is it that like Limp Bizkit and Korn were competing with Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys? It's probably because people who care about music more are passionate about things outside of bubblegum pop. And so those were the people that were probably sending in a lot of requests, I would guess. So it's like you had this weird mishmash of like Blink 182, Sum 41, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Eminem, Britney Spears, and Backstreet Boys, like all at once, you know, like competing for the same thing. And then like Eminem dissing those people, and Blink 182 parodying Backstreet Boys in their video, and all, like, it was just like, it was a time that, you know, a bygone era. And then you also have like all the new metal nostalgia we've been looking at and talking about, like System of a Down playing here a week ago, and now I'm watching Stan. So my brain is Y2K right now, is what I'm trying to say. But
so that maybe explains why you also just watched the VMAs.
yeah, it was interesting to like watch the VMAs in 2025 after kind of seeing all these TRL flashbacks in stands. And even on the VMAs, they kept showing footage of like when they would do the VMAs at MTV Spring Break in 2005. And like they showed like Green Day riding in on the car from the Boulevard of Broken Dreams video and stuff. And it was just kind of like, just such an interesting, like, you know, a way different era of MTV, you know, and they were kind of like, definitely had they were working in some clear nostalgia for that. Pretty much every artist interviewed on the red carpet was like, I grew up watching the VMAs. Like they definitely were sort of ramping up that nostalgia angle, I felt, during
Yeah, it was such a different era that you watched the VMAs this year on CBS.
Yeah, right. Not on MTV, the television channel.
But they said it was like the biggest VMAs in a while, way bigger than last year.
I mean, it's interesting because like I haven't watched the VMAs in a while, and this year I did. So it's you know, I wonder if there was something in the water.
Yeah, you contributed for sure, or maybe it was just easier to see.
Maybe, yeah. It's definitely interesting too. To, you know, like we were reminiscing on a recent episode about that era when people were saying like, what makes Lorde an alternative artist, and now reminiscing about when MTV had like Blink 182 and Sum 41 and Limp Bizkit and Korn as alternative artists. And this year, the alternative artist of the year is Somber, which maybe could get that same Lorde headline in 2025.
Oh God, I don't even want to think about that. But
it's just interesting.
No, for sure. I do kind of take it back, because I just realized I don't know if I know how to watch CBS either. Oh. I definitely don't have Paramount Plus though, so I don't know. It might take me a minute to get to that Eminem documentary.
There's some other cool stuff in there. I can't remember what else we just watched on it, but we had got it for another reason, and I kept seeing the commercials for Stans, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we have to watch that." But yeah. Anyway, while we're talking about Y2K era nostalgia, the Rilo Kiley reunion finally hit New York this week. And that Rilo Kiley were, I mean, I don't believe they were on MTV or anything, but that was definitely is in that same, I think, conversation of millennial nostalgia, or, you know, early 2000s nostalgia, with this reunion tour and with just how important that band has been to a certain generation.
For sure. When you just said Eminem was starting in 1999, I was like, yeah, Rilo Kiley already existed.
A totally normal response to have to.
Well, you know, I knew we were talking about Rilo Kiley. Rilo Kiley has been in my head. But before we talk too much more about Rilo Kiley, we wanted to invite on somebody who actually attended one of the New York City shows this week, unlike us. So, uh, you want to bring on Amanda?
Let's do it.
And Amanda, you're here.
Hi.
What's up, people? This is Amanda Hatfield, fellow Brooklyn Vegan editor. As I said right before you got here, you did attend Rilo Kiley.
I did. You know, I am often very skeptical about whether rumored reunions are actually going to happen. So, like, I just did not believe that the Oasis reunion would happen. I was like, there's no way. So when I heard mumblings that perhaps a Rilo Kiley reunion might be happening, I was definitely like, is that really going to happen? I don't know. I'm not necessarily going to believe it, but I was super excited when it was really announced, because while I've seen Jenny Lewis solo, I've seen her with the Watson twins, I've seen her in her trio Nice as Fuck. I'd never seen her with Rilo Kiley. And while she does play some Rilo Kiley songs solo, I don't know about more recently, but certainly in years past, she has. I was still just like so psyched at the prospect of seeing a band that is like extremely special to me and that I just really love. So the tour was on the West Coast first, and they hit the East Coast at the end of August. There were 4 New York City area dates, 2 in New York City, two in Manhattan, 1 in Asbury Park, and 1 in Portchester. So I went to the last of those dates at Central Park, which was actually the first one that was announced, which is kind of funny. And it was just like a gorgeous night weather-wise, just like a little bit of fall chill in the air. And so like couldn't have been nicer for a night to be out in the park. And yeah, they sounded fantastic. All the songs were just like as fresh as ever. I looked around me and so many people singing along to every song, which was like just what you would have wanted. Yeah, like songs like I Never, like, which is just like such a soaring ballad, just sounded amazing. Like I can't emphasize enough that everything sounded just like so good, and it was just like the vibes were great. So a really great show all around.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm bummed I didn't make it to I forgot there were 4 area shows, but I definitely didn't make it to the 2 or any of them. But I am hoping that I'm going to catch them next month at Best Friends Forever Fest in October, which, their tour continues for about another month, and they're hitting that festival as well as Austin City Limits right around the same time on 2 weekends. But
and Riot Fest and
Riot Fest. Good point. Lots more dates coming up. I did, however, see Rilo Kiley the first time around, and I did want to back up for a second for people who don't have the full context of Rilo Kiley. We were just saying Rilo Kiley already existed in the late 90s. They broke up by like 2010. And when Rilo Kiley formed, it was Jenny Lewis and Blake Sennett, who both were famously child actors. So and in those early years of Rilo Kiley, there did seem to be like pushback by the elite indie crowd. You could just go look at some of their early Pitchfork scores as proof of that. I was wondering if like that kind of child actor thing is what contributed a little to that at the time, because but then we've also been wondering if like the age of people contributed to that, because I mean the members of Rilo Kiley are Gen X, but there is this kind of, I don't know if we call it a meme, but a thing going around where with the reunion of Rilo Kiley, it's like the millennials band is back, and all you need to do is search Twitter for the words Rilo Kiley and millennial, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm kind of wondering like how that happened, and also how this band, who initially had some like pushback from the indie snobs of the world, became so now that is not true anymore. In fact, there was like been reevaluations just again to bring up Pitchfork. It was like best new reissue when the original EP just got reissued a few years ago.
And artists like Waxahachie have since really championed Rilo Kiley. Like Katie Crutchfield actually has a tattoo of the cover of The Execution of All Things. And she spoke with New York Times for their piece about the Rilo Kiley reunion. So I do think that there has been a reappraisal and that they do have a little bit more, like, people aren't writing them off anymore, which is amazing. And as far as the millennial meme, I will say, as an elder millennial, I definitely felt like my age group was very well represented in Central Park. Maybe some older people, some younger people, but I definitely felt like, okay, I'm in a group of my peers. Another thing that I was thinking of is that Jenny Lewis was recently playing with the Postal Service on their most recent reunion run. So it's interesting that she kind of did those two, maybe not quite back to back, but like very close to each other.
I was thinking that too. Like, it's been a big year for Jenny Lewis. And to be totally clear, she wasn't just touring with Postal Service, but as a member of Postal Service, which I guess when Postal Service formed, she wasn't technically a member, but she very quickly became a full-time member of that short-lived band who, for their reunion, are like headlining Madison Square Garden. And yeah, so it's like, not that Jenny Lewis' solo career is small by any means, but
no, not at all.
But between her solo career and then these huge Postal Service shows, and now this much anticipated huge reunion, it has felt like a great time for Jenny Lewis.
As sort of a middle millennial on the spectrum of millennials, I do think it does come down to, like, Rilo Kiley were such an like emotional, vulnerable band that, I think to go back to your indie snobbery comment, like, that type of thing was kind of frowned upon by the indie tastemakers of the time. I mean, I think Bright Eyes went through a similar thing. If you want to look at some of their early Pitchfork scores, Bright Eyes were not like, treated the way the Rapture was treated, for example. But find me someone now if that wouldn't, like, talk about Conor Oberst as one of his generation's most beloved songwriters. It wouldn't, it would be an absolute contrarian to make that point at this point in time. And I think, Rilo Kiley were on Saddle Creek with Bright Eyes and Cursive for The Execution of All Things. They were on Barsuk with Death Cab for their first record. I think that was the type of indie they were in, where they were surrounded by these bands that were like also sort of emo. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. They're playing Best Friends Forever with Cursive. But I think, that more sort of emotional stuff was kind of, and in addition to, I'm sure there was snobbery about, child actor thing, but I also think, like, people made fun of bands that were a little too honest about their feelings. And at that time, it was much more hip to be to have a little bit of a detachment from that. And I think if, like, even though they existed at the same time as bands that a lot of Gen X did love, I understand why, I've spoken to Gen X people who said I felt a little old for Rilo Kiley. And I wonder if what they were singing about was harder to relate to if you were out of your teens or early 20s at that point. Maybe it just hit harder if you were kind of in that point in your life when everything feels tragic, like, to bring up like the Billy Corgan Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness thing. Like, his whole premise with that album was like, when you're a teenager, everything is depressing, and this will relate to teenagers. And I think it did, it still does. And I think, like, similar here is
No,
yeah.
That makes sense, actually. But I do want to make clear, so as even though this kind of narrative exists about snobby, I always loved Rilo Kiley. From BrooklynVegan started in 2004. That's the same year their third full-length album and major label debut, More Adventurous, came out. And I've been listening back to the catalog recently in light of all this Rilo Kiley returning. And that's the album, More Adventurous, 2004, that I feel like That might have been my first one, because that was like when I was starting Brooklyn Vegan, I was also kind of digging into so much music at that time, and I maybe didn't know about Rilo Kiley before then. And yeah, I mean, partially because it's so front loaded and it's got portions for Foxes on it, which is just such an amazing song. One of their hits, I don't know, is it their biggest hit? It just comes back as like, I just am immediately back 20 years ago, loving that album. It puts me back. I think I saw them at Bowery Ballroom at the time, to the excitement. So even though, and I also always loved Bright Eyes. So I do think, if I'm, as much as I relate with the old snobbery, it wasn't like universal. I think Rilo Kiley was maybe more liked even than we're giving it credit. But
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they weren't like totally shit on. Like it was, it was like, they weren't as loved by the tastemakers of the time as they are by the tastemakers of now, and by the younger musicians who cite them. I mean, Amanda mentioned Waxahachie. I mean, we could if you want to talk about the artists that are either directly or at least indirectly inspired by Rilo Kiley, like Hopalong, absolutely up there. I think the whole Boy Genius crew. I think at this point you could probably even say Taylor Swift can date back to some Rilo Kiley. Their influence is everywhere, and I think that's part of it too. Is like they influence the next generation. Like you can be the most beloved band of your time, but if you didn't influence the next generation, you might fade away. And if you know what I mean? So
no, definitely. I guess to correct myself again, it's also possible that by even when the Execution of All Things came out, people by then, which was 2002, even 2 years before it, More Adventurous, that maybe also changed people's mind. That being arguably their most classic and loved album.
It's a better record than Takeoffs and Landings, I think. But Amanda, what was your first Rilo Kiley album?
Execution of All Things, and it remains my favorite. But they actually played songs from all of their albums at the show, mostly from the Execution of All Things, and the next one that Dave just said,
More Adventurous.
More Adventurous. Thank you. Mostly from those two, and those are definitely my two favorite. But Breaking Up, from their final album, actually, they played it for the first time this reunion. So the first time since, I guess, 2008. So that was very cool.
That's Under the Blacklight. I think, Andrew, you have a soft spot for that album. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess hot take among some Rilo Kiley fans, but because of my middle millennial age, I think Execution of All Things is their best record, hands down, not a debate for me. But the first one I actually got was Under the Blacklight, because I think I became familiar with them in between the release of More Adventurous and Under the Blacklight. And I think I was 16 when Under the Blacklight came out. And I think at that time in your life, sometimes you're just like, well, I may as well get the new record. I could think of a lot of examples of that for me, where
back when people actually got a record, but yes.
Right. It was, although this was still, I may have downloaded it and burned it to a CD. I may not have paid money for it. So it was like, a little bit later than when the only way was buying CDs. Yeah, so that was the first full record I had from them, so I have a soft spot for it. And I think the first song, Silver Lining, is still, I think it's one of their best songs.
That is definitely one of their best songs, and they did play that.
Nice.
I think that's their biggest song on streaming, which I was actually surprised because I expected it to be Portion for Foxes.
Well, I guess everybody's got their Rilo Kiley era. I mean, I would think it would be like the good that doesn't, right? What is the name of the long song? The track one on Execution of...
The good that won't come out of it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'll never remember that full title off the top of my head. That's their best song, I think. So it should be their biggest. But yeah, I think they're all good records. And I'm happy that we're in a time where Rilo Kiley are just legends and we don't have to worry about, defending them against snobs.
Definitely. Yeah. So if you get the chance, don't miss out on Rilo Kiley. We don't know how long this reunion will last, but we do know that there's like another month of tour dates. All right. So Amanda, thank you. And
thank you for having me.
Hope to see you at a show soon.
Definitely.
All right. Yeah, I really wish I went to one of those shows. I mean, obviously I'm a huge fan and I'm just bummed that it didn't happen for me. I actually haven't seen any show at all since the Nine Inch Nails show that we talked about on last week's episode.
Oh
But
yeah, which by the way, Amanda was also at with us.
yeah. Yeah, that was a nice team outing. Um
Yes.
but yeah, Dave, you saw a show this past week though that wasn't Rilo Kiley, I believe.
Yeah, I saw two shows actually, which were right next to each other conveniently. Here in Brooklyn, we have this cool, very huge ex warehouse venue that's now turned into it's actually three venues all in one like partition. They have this small one called Woodshop, the slightly bigger one called the Meadows, and the massive one called the Monarch. And this is where a lot of heavy shows happen, a lot of hardcore shows. Uh, there's no barrier, all that. And so on Friday night, there was a death metal show in the Monarch, and there was a DRI show in the Meadows, and the timing worked out perfectly. Partially because so Monarch, the big one, they close early so that they can have raves afterwards. But Meadows, the small one, kind of can go later. So over in the Monarch, I first saw here from Brazil, currently on tour, um, a death metal band called Crypta. All members are female, and they were amazing. I don't know, it's the best way to say it. I just was blown away by Crypta. It's kind of, how could I put it? It's not really scary death metal as much as it's like Guitar Hero death metal. And all four members are these super amazing players. Actually, they were all good, but one of the members was, I think, a fill-in for this tour. But like the three main members and the fill-in member, they're all amazing. The drummer, look at the drummer's Instagram. She's always posting videos of her drumming. It is really, really, really just mind-blowing stuff. The crowd, not often did you see an entire crowd like pumping their fists and chanting in unison, like stuff that could be considered cheesy. They just get you to do. It's like you can't help but join in and chant their name. And really fun, headbanging. Crypta, check them out. CRYPTA. Did I mention they're from Brazil? Also, actually, I totally forgot this when I was going to see them, but they are the band. Do you remember a few years ago, a horrible tragedy? Morbid Angel was on tour and they were playing in Illinois, and a tornado hit Illinois that night and actually tore through their venue and destroyed the opening band's RV and also killed somebody. Crypto was that opening band whose RV was destroyed. I remember the crowdfunding campaign at the time, and the really just like, what the hell is going on story with that tornado. That was them.
Whoa.
Anyway.
Yeah, I honestly forgot about that story, but whoa. Yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, anyway, so this was the bigger venue, the Monarch, and actually there was like a healthy crowd there. Like I see Crypta, they've been around for a few years, but they are definitely rising. I think one of their ex-members joined Tool on stage when they were in Brazil. So even right there, just more cred and proof that they know how to play their instruments. But
well, I look forward to the next Crypta press release saying Guitar Hero Death Metal - Brooklyn Vegan.
Yes. So that show ended just by 10 o'clock, which meant I could easily go over to the smaller venue, Meadows, right next door, to see the legends of crossover thrash hardcore DRI, which I always loved DRI. I haven't seen them forever. And that was just awesome to see DRI. I mean, playing all their old hits. And that was also a lively, packed crowd. People with half the fun of that show was the crowd. There were two people there with legit mohawks. There was somebody in the pit in a wheelchair. There was all kinds of characters, diverse people from all walks of life, lots of dirty looking, street punky looking people. And that was just
lots of dirty, rotten imbeciles.
Yes, exactly. So it was just a lot of fun. And DRI, who are probably like, I don't know, in their 60s, there was a lot of nostalgia talk on stage. Sometimes I was wondering, like, have you been saying this for 20 years? You'd be like, can you imagine? We're on a long tour right now. Can you imagine in the 80s we had to use cell phones and we didn't know if our wives left us, stuff like that on stage. But very fun. DRI. Still
Awesome.
worth seeing. And that's it. That's the only show I saw since Nine Inch Nails. I was sad to miss Rilo Kiley. I'm also bummed I didn't go see Ethel Cain last night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. I've never seen DRI, but I love a good 80s thrash show in the present day. So I'll have to add that to my bucket list.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
they're good. I mean, it's two original. Is the
mhm.
singer and the guitarist? They're both the original guys, and then of course, noticeably younger. They're all in good shape.
Right. No, I mean, like there's something about those kind of shows though. Like, I don't know why my brain's going here. It could go lots of places, but one of my like favorite Riot Fest memories is the first time I saw Testament at Riot Fest, and it's just like I'm like every festival should have old thrash bands. It's insanely fun, perfect for an outdoor fest. Like people don't know what they're missing if they've never seen Testament at a festival.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of bands really good at their instruments, yeah, Testament, always an amazing show.
Yeah. So how about some way newer music?
Yeah, what's out this week?
So my favorite album out this week is a band you turned me on to, I think a year or so ago, Maruja, this UK band. Before I get into their record, Dave, you really sold me on this band. Do you remember your first impression of them and why they stood out to you so much?
Yeah, just their mix of like jazz and post-punk. And I think at the time I said, who were the three bands? Anyway, I was like,
I think you said they would appeal to fans of Idols, Black Country New Road, Micaiah McCraven, and oh man, there was one other.
yeah, I said it would unite the fans of those three bands.
Yes, there was one. There's one more. I'm pulling it up. I'm pulling it up because it was like it was an epic. I feel like it's Brooklyn Vegan lore at this point.
True. Well, the Idols comparison is stuck with me, especially. Well, first of all, the jazz comparison. There was jazz there. Since then, they put out an EP that's 100% jazz last year.
Earlier. Chat Pile was the other one you mentioned.
Oh yeah, there you go.
That's interesting because like that one, the rest I still agree with.
Okay, I was trolling a little bit to try to get you guys to listen, but yeah.
Well,
so,
it ended up in a Brooklyn Vegan news article. So,
well, they definitely have that kind of noisy, shouty, and they go all over the place in their music. And I have since seen them live after I booked them for a Brooklyn Vegan South by Southwest show. Was it this year or last year?
It was. Oh, what was it? It was.
I don't know.
No, it was earlier this year.
Yeah. So we got them. I was excited. We got them to play they were coming to South by Southwest, which is exciting. They also hit Brooklyn on that tour. They played Market Hotel. But their show was huge. And it definitely reminded me of seeing Idols at South by Southwest so many, many years earlier, in that kind of energy they brought. And although unlike Idols, they also had, if I remember correctly, a saxophone player on stage the whole time.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely theatrical live show, a lot of crowd interaction, a lot of packed crowd dancing, going crazy. So they bring that. That was, but their new album is here.
Yeah, I haven't seen them live yet, so I'm excited to hopefully do that soon because you're selling me on the show. And this is a band where I love the record, but I'm like, oh, I hope it's this good. Like you can just feel like it's got to be a great live show. I really hope it is. So I'm feeling good about it. But yeah, I mean, to go back to those three of those four comparisons, sorry, Chat Pile. I think I opened my review of the record saying that they basically are the bridge between like the Idols, Fontaines DC, like current post-punk revival, but still ongoing sort of UK post-punk revival and Ireland, and then also they're like the bridge between that and the sort of Black MIDI, Black Country Road squid, like I guess what they call the windmill scene, because of a venue called the Windmill, I think, which I believe Maruja have also performed at. But they feel like the exact middle point of those two scenes, with like sort of an exit ramp from that bridge that goes off into the UK jazz renaissance. So yeah, it's the only band I can think of that I would say that exact sentence about.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
And then for
how much jazz is there on the new album?
I mean, I would say it's so like you said, that they just wrapped up a trilogy of EPs earlier this year that began in 2023, and the latest, the third of the three, is a completely jazz. It's like spiritual jazz, super influenced by like Alice Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, and for a group, for like a British, I believe, all white members punk band. I mean, they nail it. Yeah, I would say the new record is like, jazz is 100% a prominent ingredient throughout. For a less modern comparison, I also sort of said they were like if you would put in a blender like kind of Crass with their like Anocar punk side, and then like Public Image with their sort of just like crazy art punk, and Stooges Funhouse side B, where it's like sort of this jazz punk fusion. Picture all that at once, and that's like what this record sounds like. It's really, I think it's such a step up from the EPs, which obviously were already great, and it just feels like when I see a band come out with EPs and then they're like, now we're doing a full length, I'm always like, please have the full length be like this leveling up, longer, more fleshed out moment, and not just like a longer version and that maybe gets more boring than the already great EPs. And that's, Maruja did the former. Like it's like it feels like in hindsight that the EPs were just them like working out sort of all their ideas in order to do like an excellent debut full length. And it really is that. And again, to go back to like the Crass comparison, I mean, the album title, Pain to Power, like it's fully a protest album. Like if you just take the lyrics themselves, this is like empowering, angry, sad, so emotional, like protest music. And then another sort of thing I dropped in the review is like, I feel like it's like post-punk's answer to Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, where it's like with this, which is also this protest album, but it's like for rap, it was like this jazz-induced musical odyssey that's so chaotic. And that's like this, like it's this jazz-induced post-punk chaos, which is like a lot of times protest music like Crass or, or Woody Guthrie or a lot of like political punk stuff will be keep the music simple so the focus is on the words. And Maruja are like, let's have the music be like absolutely nuts while we're also delivering these slogans you could chant at a protest rally, like they look down on us, which just feels like, I keep going back to Crass because it feels to me like the modern day, like, do they owe us a living kind of thing. But yeah, what an album. Really, really good.
What else is out this week?
Well, I don't want to harp too much on Algernon Cadwallader's first record in 14 years because I feel like we gave it a lot of time on last week's episode talking about being anticipated for it, but it's out. It's amazing. And if you are an emo fan, I think one of the great reasons, of the many great reasons that it is great that Algernon are back, said great twice in a row, is that when Algernon first came out, like that sort of Midwest emo thing was like, you could count on two hands the amount of current active bands that were really even still sounding like that. And now, like, because of bands like Algernon, it's like a thriving subgenre with countless great new bands. And one of those great new bands is Saturdays at Your Place. And speaking of real leveling up moments, their sophomore record, These Things Happen, is out today. And I feel like it is hugely, like, it's just their best thing yet, definitely. And it follows their really good EP from 2023 called Always Cloudy, which felt like their pivotal, like you could hear the potential for something bigger than this one is there. Like it definitely reminds me of modern baseball, without sounding like a total copy or anything like that. And I think it's like I don't feel as compelled to make this type of argument as I did 10, 15 years ago when we had to kind of like make the case that emo was it a subgenre of indie rock. But if you're still kind of like scared at the word emo and you like indie rock, I mean, this record you should check out. Two really fun punk records out this week: Restraining Orders, Future Fortune, and Die Spitz is something to consume for very different reasons, but equally just fun, rowdy, good punk stuff. The Sound of Animals Fighting's first full length in 17 years. The Maiden is out. They're an experimental post-hardcore supergroup. Lead vocalist is, well, they have a lot of lead vocalists, but sort of the core one is Anthony Green from Circa Survive, Ellis Dune, Saosin, and then they have members of RX Bandits, and they're I think no band is like them. They're totally nuts. And, we could probably dedicate a whole episode to how nuts their career is, but check that record out. Another record that I think is really, really cool is Casa Overall has this record called Cream, and it's a jazz album that, like, talking about jazz, right? One of the reasons that jazz has had the comeback it's been having is because it's so often used as source material in hip hop samples. And Casa Overall has kind of flipped that script. And this album is all like these jazz renditions of beats from classic hip hop songs, like the title track Cream, the Wu-Tang song, and, Dr. Dre's Nothing But a G Thing, and Diggable Planets, Rebirth of Slick, Cool Like That, Tribe Called Quest, Check the Rhyme, Outkast, Spotty Yachty, Dopalicious, and Juvenile's Back That Ass Up. And he takes these really familiar instrumentals and just goes off into crazy jazz territory. I think you would like it a lot, but
yeah, I need to hear that.
Yeah. And then one more, speaking of covers, an EP that is way better than it has any right to be is Iron and Wine and Ben Bridwell from Band of Horses covers EP. They do these like somber indie folk covers of like songs you wouldn't expect to hear in that realm, like songs by Foreigner and Kendrick Lamar and SZA. And it's like the kind of thing that could seem like too campy on paper, but doesn't sound campy in execution. Yeah, those are the records that I review this week in notable releases. And then, as always, you can head to Indie Basement for more reviews by Bill, including the new records by Baxter Dury, Griff Reese from Super Furry Animals, the post-punk legends, the Chameleons, their first album in 24 years, Gorilla Toss, Sydney Minsk Sargent, which is the singer of Working Men's Club in more of a folky singer-songwriter mode, solo debut, and also the Hidden Cameras.
And let's not forget, I guess in neither post, but I will give it a shout out, is the 5th album in 5 years from Michigan power pop band Liquid Mike, who are who are, by the way, really good live too. And who are playing kind of part of that power pop revival with a bunch of other similarly talked about bands right now. But also I thought it was interesting because, these power pop bands are not a million miles away from like these hardcore adjacent bands. So it made total sense to me that Liquid Mike's upcoming tour is actually opening for Military Gun, and with Public Opinion also on there. And did Liquid Mike actually played shows with Drug Church too?
Yeah, and they just did a tour with Descendants earlier this year too.
Oh yeah, so right. And I know a huge Descendants fan who was one of the first people who asked me if I had heard Liquid Mike. So like Liquid Mike kind of span the pop punk, hardcore adjacent, and power pop worlds.
Yeah, I mean they did a tour with Wonder Years and Menzingers too. So yeah, they're definitely pretty, like, I feel like, when you're talking about that scene in general, like I think they're kind of similar to Hotline TNT, who also, like, I saw open for Gouge Away and who are on hardcore shows a lot, but who sound more like Super Drag or something.
Right. So yeah.
Speaking of hardcore, can we talk about my favorite song of the week?
Yes.
Speed. Yeah. The Australian hardcore band Speed have just been like, just feels like they're getting bigger and bigger and better and better. And, I saw them at Coachella earlier this year where they killed it, and they've got a new 3-song EP coming out in October on Flat Spot. As exciting as it is, it's also like kind of sad because the reason the EP is 3 songs is that it's about the passing of 3 close friends, recent passings of Speed. I believe each song is about a different friend, and the first single Peace is out. So it's like simultaneously like really depressing and also powerful. And it's also like just I think one of their best, most instantly satisfying, most interesting songs yet. It's like they continue to be so good at doing really aggressive hardcore that kind of like flirts with little things from outside of the sort of like stereotypical hardcore formula without ever really going into being like, a hardcore adjacent thing. Like they're still way too aggressive for that. So I hope to see them on Tiny Desk in the near future. I think they'd be great for that. But yeah, it's just so good. And it's really great timing that it comes just days before they begin their tour with Turnstile, which it's the lineup for this tour is amazing. It's like we've talked about it before. We talked about Turnstile a lot, obviously, but Turnstile's tour starts on Monday, and the first leg, all dates are with Speed and Jane Remover. And then the first leg has Mannequin Pussy as direct support. Second leg has Amel and the Sniffers as direct support. And then there's a couple shows in the first leg that instead of Mannequin Pussy is Blood Orange, which I've got my eye on those shows because Dev from Blood Orange and Turnstile have already performed live together on multiple occasions. And now there's a new song on the new Blood Orange record that Brendan Yates from Turnstile sings on. So I've got my fingers crossed that we get the live debut of that collab. But yeah, this tour is like not to miss. The lineup is amazing. And I really, really hope that, because obviously Turnstile are so big, they have so many fans who just probably don't listen to other bands in the current hardcore scene, just based on, to go back to the Sum 41 thing, like just, it's harder to look for. You got to dig, it just is what it is. But I really hope that people walk away from this tour being like, oh my God, Speed. Like get there on, if you're listening to this and you don't know Speed and you're going to the tour, get there on time for Speed. Get there on time for the whole lineup. See Jane Remover, who opens, obviously.
Are you so sure about that order?
I think it's Jane Remover, then Speed, then Mannequin Pussy. But all right, whatever it is, get there when the show starts. Don't miss the openers. This is very important. It's an amazing lineup. It's so well curated. It just feels like, I don't think I could. I said this on an earlier episode of BV Weekly, but I can't picture a more perfect lineup for Turnstile than the combo of Mannequin Pussy and Speed, for me personally. Then you add Jane Remover on that. I of course
agree. Yeah.
So, and yeah, it's and we're talking about this just a day after we saw Turnstile do the first ever Tiny Desk stage dive. Did you watch the clip of that?
I did. A venue much smaller than they're playing on this tour.
Yeah, much smaller. Yeah, it was so shout out Soul Glow for the reported first Tiny Desk mosh pit, but now Turnstile making their second Tiny Desk appearance, but first at the actual Tiny Desk, because they did their first one during COVID lockdown when NPR was doing like Tiny Desk at home concerts. But yeah, so shout out Soul Glow for, kind of, I don't know, opening the doors to like bringing actual hardcore show energy to Tiny Desk, and then Turnstile with the Jimi Hendrix lighting his guitar to Soul Glow's The Who knocking over their drums at Monterey Pop Festival. That analogy is probably for no one. But yeah, it's cool. Very, very, very must watch if you haven't seen it. Turnstile had a acoustic piano player and a horn section, and they did Dreaming, the song from Never Enough, with horns as the first song in the set, which they didn't play when they were in Brooklyn earlier this year. And it's one of my favorites on the new record. And then they did all the other songs in the set with adding in horns just for this. But yeah, I hope we get Dreaming with horns, or at least Dreaming in general on this tour. So I'll stop being a Turnstile stan. Before we move on from new music, for fans of classic indie, we got album announcements and lead singles or new singles from Tortoise and the Mountain Goats this week. We were talking about new metal earlier, so it's time to plug the first Mudvayne songs in 16 years. There's two of them. They're on a 7-inch that comes out in January, and we actually have a clear black exclusive splatter vinyl variant of said 7-inch in our online store, shop.brooklynvegan.com. I think, Mudvayne were always associated with Slipknot, and with Slipknot being, you're talking about Pitchfork reviews, right? So like reevaluations on Pitchfork, Slipknot are fresh off this week's best new reissue for their debut record's 25th anniversary.
That was very unexpected.
Yeah. So in the wake of, hey, Slipknot is being reevaluated, don't sleep on the comeback of Mudvayne. And then to go full circle on Y2K nostalgia, and with new metal in the mix, Fresh off opening for System of a Down, Wisp released a shoegaze cover of Coldplay's Yellow. What a range of millennial nostalgia Wisp has for someone who is very, very much Gen Z. What else happened this week, Dave?
Well, starting off on a sad note, we lost two beloved musicians this week. Bruce Luce, vocalist of the highly influential noise punk band Flipper, passed away from an apparent heart attack after decades of back problems that caused him to leave the band. I feel lucky to have seen Flipper many years ago. And
With
Alan,
Bruce?
oh yeah, and Alan Blickel, original Baroness drummer who played on their classic Red, Blue, and Yellow and Green albums. He also passed away. Rest in peace to these two heroes. After winning 4 VMAs and broadcasting her VMAs performance from one of her 6 Madison Square Garden shows, Lady Gaga has expanded her tour, including 2 more nights at the Garden happening in March next year. Sources tell Rolling Stone that Sabrina Carpenter and Karol G are set to headline Coachella 2026, while Hits Daily Double also says that Kendrick Lamar and Dua Lipa are on board. If true, I guess this means no Oasis.
Good point.
We're still waiting for an update on that Erykah Badu and the Alchemist album, but meanwhile, Arm & Hammer and the Alchemist just announced new album Mercy, due in November. Listen, Arm & Hammer keeps releasing albums, keeps doing features. This is still super exciting.
And Billy Woods had a record this year. So it's so prolific.
Yes, right. And my mind was just like, yeah, Billy Woods this year. Good album. Arm & Hammer, which is Billy Woods and Elucid together. Coming soon with The Alchemist, more importantly. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard now have put their entire catalog on Bandcamp for Name Your Price after removing it from Spotify earlier this year. And they're already breaking records on Bandcamp with that. It's like, so Tennessee Music Festival, Big Ears has announced its 2026 lineup. We love Big Ears. Everybody who goes to Big Ears raves about it. This is definitely a fest to consider if you're thinking about which fest you want to go to next year. It's a multi-venue one, and its lineup features a lot of jazz, as always, and also MJ Lenderman, David Byrne, Robert Plant, Laurie Anderson, and John Zorn. Like I said, lots of jazz. Tunde from TV on the Radio, model actress, perfume genius, Shabaka, Ryan Davis, much, much, much more. The flyer, very hard to read because it has 10 million names on it. Go check that out. And this week, we also released 2 new episodes of our Brooklyn Vegan interview podcast. I know it's confusing, 2 Brooklyn Vegan podcasts now, but make sure you subscribe to this one, BV Weekly, by the way, if you don't already, and also the Brooklyn Vegan interview podcast, which if you do, you'll already know that earlier this week, Bill interviewed Saint Etienne on there, and more recently, a new episode with a member of Suede, both UK bands, classic UK bands with great new albums that are out. So check those out. And Andrew, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Go check shop.brooklynvegan.com. I don't know if you really want that Mudvayne 7-inch, but we have lots of other good stuff in there too. And talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Dave and I will be back every Friday morning with new episodes of BV Weekly. And in between the episodes, you can always get much more from us at brooklynvegan.com, on all of our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can pick up records from us at shop.brooklynvegan.com. And if you like what you hear, tell your friends about us, subscribe to the show, give us a good rating. All that little stuff goes a really long way. It really helps us a lot, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much to Joe D'Agostino from Cymbals Z Guitars and Empty Country for the great theme song. Our mix engineer, Nick Gray. Thank you again, and see you next time.